Thanks, everyone. So this is my first XConf too. I was going to ask that question, but I didn't know it was going to be asked. But maybe at the end of the day, we can do the same thing, but ask if it's going to be your last XConf as well. Right? It would be interesting. No, thanks for being here. So it says last call for responsible tech, but it's probably not going to be the last call, right? Because we're going to continue to advocate for it and call for it until it's no longer necessary, right? It shouldn't be a thing; it should be the default. But we're going to talk about it. But it's sometimes hard to define. So like Alex said, we're going to talk a lot about the future and the future of technology specifically, and how software development and data and AI is going to evolve. What I want to take a step back and just talk about the future in general, because at the end of the day, that's what we're about. So I want to start off with this statement. So is the future of technology, does it have a one-on-one correlation with the future of humanity? Who thinks it's going to be fully... The future of humanity is going to be fully determined by the future of technology? Well, not everyone. Like in a great part, will the influence be big? Yeah. All right, that's good. There's no correlation at all. The future of humanity is set. Whatever we do, nothing's going to change. Okay, at least that's a good result for me. So we do believe that future of technology is important. So given that, let's look at what the future could look like. And there's basically two streams of thoughts in the extremes, right? What does that future look like? There's the utopian view. Everything's going to be awesome. We're going to solve all the big problems. We'll control the climate. We'll cure disease. We'll have food for everybody because of genetic editing, whatever. Everything's going to be great. Utopian view, I like to call it the idealist view. I stole this picture from the internet, by the way. It's not AI generated, unfortunately. Does anybody know what movie this is from? No? Yes, Elysium. So thank you. There's typically somebody, but sometimes there's no one that knows this, and then it gets kind of awkward. It's Elysium. So if you know the movie, you also know there's another side of it as well, right? So Elysium it's an average movie, science fiction with Matt Damon, but it's not about that. But then they build this utopian world in the sky, but on the surface it looks a bit different, right? So there's the other side of the spectrum, which is the dystopian view. Everything's going to shit. We have climate meltdown, AI apocalypse, the robots will take over, so everything is going down the drain. If you take these two extremes, I'll do another one. Where do we sit when we look forward? Where are we headed, in your opinion? Towards the utopian view? Anybody? Really? Nobody? Oh, thank you, yeah. Maybe towards the more dystopian side? Anybody? Yeah, a lot more. Yeah, so we're concerned, which is good. I think we need to be in the middle, and I think that's what it's about. And there's no good and bad, right? I think we need the utopian view and the idealist view to sort of give hope and inspiration. Where are we going to go? What's possible? And drive ourselves to solve these big problems. But at the same time, we also need the activist or the dystopian view to warn us of the dangers and to keep us safe, more or less. And so we like to call that the pragmatic view. Right? Don't get too judgmental about left or right, but say let's be in the middle there and make sure we balance these things out. So we take the warnings, but we also follow our hopes and inspirations. I think you already gave me the answer in the vote for dystopian view. This is where we are now. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the concept of the donut economy. Yes. Perfect. I can talk for hours about this, but I won't. I only have like 30 seconds, I guess, for this thing. The clock is not working, by the way. So the concept of the donut economy, which was created by Kate Raworth, who was always introduced as a renegade economist. So that also tells you something about their leverage in the market. And she said, like, it's not possible to draw or visualize economy on growth only. Right? Growth is finite. There's no such thing as infinite growth. We need to look at it in a different way. So she created a donut where we say, people need to be inside the donut. That's where it's good. Like in the bottom is where the social foundation is. If you go through the bottom, if you end up in the middle of the donut, you don't have access to maybe healthcare or housing or education and so forth. And then the outer crust is about planetary boundaries, where how are we depleting the planet, and how are we, what are the boundaries we're crossing. And this is the latest visualization, where obviously the red's bad, right? So there's too many people stuck in the middle. The wealth gap is growing, regardless of what we think, on a global level for sure, but even on a local level. You see it in the Netherlands, the gap between the rich people and the rest is increasing. And I think we all know that we are crossing a lot of planetary boundaries, so we need to take care of that. So there's definitely an urgency to solve these big problems. And then technology comes in. So how can we use technology to clean up this picture, let's say, and to make that a bit greener and a bit less red? And then we look at technology, and we often look at the internet, and we make the misconception that everything we create is available for everyone, because it isn't. So worldwide, only 2/3, or a little less than 2/3, have even access to the internet, let alone all this new stuff and AI and what have you. And that also, to some extent, means if you're not part of the internet, you're probably a victim, right? And if you look at the graph, I know it's very small print. Europe's doing great, and then America's doing great, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and Africa is really down here. Which is interesting, because they're one of the biggest drivers of the internet and technology, because of the rich metals that they have in the ground. So they're the victims of the internet, more or less, because there's a lot of human rights violations going on just because we're harvesting the resources. But only 2/3 of the world population actually have access to the internet. And out of those, and it's an old graph, I haven't found any more recent research on it, unfortunately, but tech angst is the thing. People that use technology, but don't really understand it, or don't care, or maybe they're even worried about it, or afraid of it. That went up to 24% in 2019. Out of those, 64%. So that means that like half the population either doesn't have access to internet, or is afraid of it, or afraid of technology in general. And that poses a problem, because everybody is using it at the same time. And the sector is just pushing stuff that people apparently don't understand. That's risky. Fortunately for us, there's people like you that do understand technology. But just to put that in perspective, this is a count or a statistic about the number of people that are working in IT worldwide. It's 62 million. It probably doesn't capture everything, right? There'll be freelancers and everything. Let's say it's 100 million. That's still only 1.25% of the world's population that is making the software that's driving the world. And that's creating that future of humanity. And that's you. So you're part of that 1.25%. And that's, I guess, concludes my story, just to raise some urgency and importance and give you the responsibility to create that better future. And then Alex here is going to tell you how you're going to do that. Right?
Thanks, Martin. So yeah, the point here is like we're part of this 1.25%, and we all agree that we have a lot of impact potential through this stuff we are building with technology, right? So I'm not sure how you feel today with all the changes in technology, right? But I sometimes feel like this. There's a lot of stuff changing, right? And in the past 10, 15 years, this has been increasing much more. And it's not necessarily the way you have to react. So this is not just technology, but also society in general is becoming more demanding, right? So people are getting used to new ways of interacting with computer, and they don't expect less than that. So it gets more pressure for us, because we are just 1.25% of these people. So some people might even react like this character called Cave Johnson from an amazing game called Portal 2. I'm not sure if you know it. But yeah, so some people might even react. So when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad, right? Doesn't matter how you react. You cannot be just indifferent to what's happening with technology nowadays. And this is not something new. So this is happening for a while now. So inside Thoughtworks, we've seen a trend where we stopped being just generalist software developers, and we started talking more about potential specializations, right? So I think front-end and back-end one a natural first one. So does it make sense to hire front-end people? Okay, if you see like the front-end landscape, it's very complex, right? So it's harder and harder for a full-stack developer to do everything. And then you put other things on top. You have IoT, you have AI, you have machine learning, and then you try to deploy your stuff. Maybe you don't even realize that your application is buried inside layers in some public cloud. And if you do understand, you still have to manage all this cognitive load yourself. We have ways to cope with that. We have like platform engineering and things like that, but still, things are more complex nowadays. And that's for us. So we are building technology and we see this stuff under the hood. So in another angle, from a user point of view, right? So if you go back a couple of years, I'm not going to review how many years here, but if you look at this picture closely in the right, in the left side, you will realize that it's actually Martin there with a very fancy shirt.
It's in the 80s. It's in the 80s. It was very, very fashionable then.
And the picture in the right, so this is the first computer I used. I'm not that old. This is my father's computer, to be fair with you. But the point here is like, for me to use that thing, I had to learn the basic programming language first to actually do anything. And then the input was something like this that would produce this output. And I was pretty excited about it. And I would just make this train to go from left to right and make weird sounds with the speaker, right? And then if we fast forward for today, you can go to ChatGPT and ask it to describe it, a visit to McDonald's in the style of Ernest Hemingway. So there's a difference, right? So on the surface, technology is becoming more simple in a way, even though under the hood we have more and more moving parts. And the interesting thing for us is like, we have seen this pattern happening in many clients, right? Nowadays we have this Gen AI FOMO, fear of missing out, and we see many clients that come to us and say, look, give me 2 Gen AI implementation, please. Yeah, but what's your use case? No, we'll talk about that later, right? So we see this as a trend, and when we start implementing this stuff, there are many ways of doing this, right? So of course, we're not just using, I don't know, an OpenAI call with public data. Usually we enrich it with like domain-based specific data, and there are different patterns in terms of architecture on how to do that. But the interesting thing is that you look at this and it's pretty simple. And you think, okay, but any regular developer can do that, right? And then we put our data scientists with some experience with about language processing, right? Natural language processing. And they start to get crazy about, okay, how are we going to put this stuff in production, right? So first, how can you test this against defects? It's not that it's not possible, it's just that people are not thinking about it. So some people call hallucinations of the model, but you need to put that in your pipeline. You're using a model that can change from one day to the other without notice, right? So, and that's just an example of many things. So you need to consider any bias that your model might have, intellectual property breaches, privacy concerns, so on and so forth. So technology is more accessible, but it also makes it more dangerous in a way, or we have an important role to make. Right? We need to ask the tough questions to create this awareness. So the bottom line is like all this increased complexity and interconnectedness means that all these unintended consequences are harder to predict, right? So it's not just enough to just like, okay, let me take one story from Trello, from the Jira board, and let me develop. No, how do we change the way we develop software systematically to start asking these tough questions, right? So the impact can be very big. And I'm not sure if you are aware, you probably are, but we have many interesting examples. And I want to start with a good one, right? So with all this LLM hype, we see a very interesting space. So this is one case where LLMs are used to improve the antibody production. In this specific case is for therapies against COVID, Ebola, and other viruses. We are also working with some pharmaceutical companies that want to do drugs against cancer, and they use a similar approach. So it's pretty nice to see this happening. But in some other more green cases, so the second case, for example, in US, one man received a sentence that was very long. He was the main suspect for a crime. The police used an algorithm that was essentially a black box that gave an output that was a risk score. So main suspect, highest risk score equals to sentence. And the man said, okay, I do not agree with that. What's the logic that is inside this black box? And people said, okay, there's a fair ask. And the final conclusion was, I'm sorry, we cannot actually assess the black box, and we actually trust the output, right? So what do we do? with cases like this. So the third case is also in US. So the difference in wealth between a median white family and a median black family is quite big. So a median white family can actually have 10 times more wealth than a median black family. So if a black family is asking for a mortgage, right, is the system considering this background or not? Because in this case, people are just being denied. They are not receiving the mortgage. They can pay for it. Business-wise, it's still good money. They wouldn't. They don't want to leave money out of the table, right? But still, there's a bias there. So because of all these examples, we developed something that we call Responsible Tech Playbook, and we did a study with MIT called the State of Responsible Technology. So for us, it's like for individuals, it's not clear when these decisions are being made by our algorithm or not. And from a society perspective, it's not obvious the results of these decisions, if they are impartial, really, if they are even right. Okay, so that's what motivates us to start making all these questions. So the consequences of not incorporating this can be really devastating for us, for everybody. So we as technologists, we have a pivotal role here. So we need to actually create this awareness and start thinking about how we change the software development life cycle to include this thinking. So that's all nice, right? How can we actually start? And so I think that's the main point of today's talk. Inside Thoughtworks, we tend to use a double diamond that is like a classic design process mindset thing. So we'd like to use it when we talk about the complete cycle of software development. So we start by discovering what we need to do. We do some divergent thinking. Once we discover everything that we need, we start defining it. And then in the later stage, when everything is defined, we design and implement. So it's always these two cycles of diverging and converging. So we believe that there are many tools that can help you in these different stages of software development. So it's not just when I'm coding. No, when you're thinking about your requirements, it's already a good time to start making these questions, right? So we have different categories of tools here. So for example, some tools can help you to open up your perspective or to mitigate potential risks or even unpack stakeholder value. So many companies are now have the ESG goals, for example, and they're pretty much interested in this kind of thinking. So there are many examples out there. You can check the Responsible Tech Playbook by yourselves, but if you don't know where to start, we recommend these 3 tools. Probably the most simple one is the one in the right, the Tarot Cards of Tech. It's simply used to open up perspectives and start getting into this mindset. Next step, you could use Ethical Explorer and Consequence Scanning, right? So they serve not only to open up perspectives, but also to mitigate potential risks. And there are many other examples also in the Responsible Tech Playbook. So what can we do today, objectively, right? So the first thing, be aware that you have a very important role in this. So it's up to us. We are this 1.25%, right? So we need to create this awareness, and we have to spread this awareness to our team, to our companies, right? Then you can explore practices and tools. You can use a Responsible Tech Playbook, but you can use whatever you want. Maybe it doesn't work for your context, right? So it's just to give you some ideas. Test what works for you. And then the last one that is very important, be the one asking the tough questions. So we have this very important role.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, you can start by asking us questions today, right? We have a lot of interesting talks today, even some that are very close to this topic. We have Jesse on responsible AI, Larissa on accessibility, which is part of that as well. I think there's Jose on observability and how you deal with data. I think Anna on data testing. So all like these important topics are hidden in everything we do on a day-to-day basis. So start asking those tough questions today. And to just recap, there's no such thing as responsible technology, to be honest, because tech's just there, right? It needs power and it's running somewhere in a data center probably. But we need responsible technologists, and because they are the ones running the show and creating. And it's not just the people writing the code. It's the product owners, the executives that make the decisions where to invest in and so forth. Everybody that touches technology needs to sort of grasp that technology. And like Alex said, it's because the problems are more complex, and society is extremely demanding, right? We don't want those lemons. We're not going to make lemonade. We start complaining. We expect everything to be solved by technology. So there's this huge pressure on us. So why isn't this done yet, right? Why can't we cure this? Why can't we solve this huge problem? And with that pressure, that sort of amplifies the need for responsibility. And we don't do this because it's easy. We do it because it's hard, and it's even harder to make it look easy, right? Like Alex said, everything is just a swipe away, but nobody knows the complexity in the background, and also the risks in the background. And AI is a great example, right? Nobody really knows what's going on. I'm pretty sure that the tech angst graph will spike when people are exposed to these AI interfaces. And it's not just about the software, right? It's about every form of technology and science, like genetic editing, quantum computing is coming, so that's part of coding. Everything is driven by software to some extent, so driven by us. So if that's true, that software better be good. And not just functionally good, but sustainably good, socially good, ethically good, accessibility-wise good. And it's up to us to make it so, or based better, it's up to you to make it so. So with that, I guess I'll get out of the way and get ready for track 2 here, right? And track 1 on the other side. And I want to thank you and wish you all a great conference.
Thank you.